Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Nintendo may actually have been holding back a great deal for this upcoming Nintendo Direct. Now, what is this upcoming Nintendo Direct? There is an uncertainty there. There are murmurings or whispers of a partner showcase, but are they solid? I'm not so sure they are solid. And eventually you would think Nintendo is going to get back to the bigger directs, and it's getting to that point in time where that kind of needs to happen. And so when you consider, if you walk with me here on everything that's been going on, it's been a very strange situation, in the sense that Nintendo has been doing things in a way where you might have been led to believe they would have had shown a lot more by this point, and they haven't. There are things that they for sure have brewing. Obviously, they're always making games here, but there's things that should not be far off. And so, when you kind of consider the entire situation, and you think about what may be next in terms of the directs, I myself am left thinking, yeah, they've been holding a lot back for this one. And so, that's what we're diving into today. And all I ask is that you sit back, hear me out, and let me know what you think at the end of the video in the comments below. So first, let's re-tackle this partner direct situation, because we did talk about it a couple of days ago. I talked about how there's this rumor going around that there might be a partner showcase, which I would not want to happen. I do not want to believe in this, because if there is going to be a partner showcase soon, that would come with a potential implication, depending on exactly how the partner showcase is, that there will not be a general Nintendo Direct soon. And so the reason why there would be an implication is that if you look at the history of partner showcases, when we get a partner showcase, that is the Nintendo Direct for a few months. Like, there won't be a big Nintendo Direct to follow soon after. Unless it's like a partner showcase mini. If it's a partner showcase mini, and not a full partner showcase, then I do think that changes things a little bit here. And so we've spoken to some people that said some things that might lead you to think there could be a partner. Nothing solid, nothing totally concrete. There's more so word of there being some kind of game, having an update of some kind next week. We'll see what happens. But Switchforce, who has a history of hearing about directs ahead of time, did say this: rumblings of a partner direct seem to be stirring, which goes back to what I've been saying. Nothing totally solid, nothing totally concrete. Switchforce isn't definitively saying a partner is happening soon, simply suggesting there's something to these whispers. So I'm going to remain optimistic here and assume that this is not going to get in the way of a bigger Nintendo Direct that we have been anticipating to happen in June. And we've been over this already recently. This idea that we've been waiting such a long time for the big Nintendo Direct. The last time we had a general Nintendo Direct was last September. That's a pretty long wait, one of the longer waits we've been through when it comes to big directs, and considering this is the beginning of the Switch 2 era, yeah, you would think they would give us another one. But let's start to talk about what Nintendo is holding back here, or why it seems like they've been holding back a lot here. So, for example, we've gotten reconfirmation that both Elden Ring and the Dustbloods are expected to release on Switch 2 in 2026. This isn't any sort of big update, but it's a reaffirmation giving us more confidence that these games have not been delayed beyond the year. Especially when we talk about the Dustbloods, that being a new game being made exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2 by From Software, partnered with Nintendo. Nintendo is publishing the Dustbloods here. They are helping to get this game out there. This is going to be one of the biggest games of the year from Nintendo. And so it is a key release, and to hear that it's still coming out in 2026 is reassuring. But given that we are now in the latter half of May here, it certainly does lead you to wonder, when are we going to see news on the Dustbloods? And then also news on Elden Ring, another From Software title that was supposed to have come out last year, was delayed to optimize the Switch 2 version, and you would think there's going to have to be a healthy gap between those releases. They wouldn't be coming out in the same month or even in back-to-back months, I would assume. I would assume there would have to be a bit of a gap. Now, we did see a retail listing suggesting that Elden Ring would be coming out in July, which wouldn't be too long from now, and if the Dust Ones is coming out sometime in the window of October through December, then I think that would be a healthy gap between these releases. Now, maybe they could talk about these in a partner showcase. Maybe there is going to be some kind of partner showcase where they announce that Elden Ring is finally coming out. Of course, they could just do that with just a trailer update. They don't have to have a whole partner showcase. The Dust Bloods is a very, very big deal game. I don't know if they just want to have that in a partner showcase, although it could be the premier big title that draws everyone to a partner showcase. But also, it makes tons of sense to be featured in a Nintendo Direct. I actually see it as a fantastic opener for a Super Nintendo Direct. I've touched on the idea of a Super Direct before, but I'll circle back to that because I really want to focus on just how Nintendo has been holding back here. So I want to go back to this post from February 2024. It's extremely interesting in hindsight. Nintendo Switch 2 launch window reportedly shifts to early 2025. Murmurings of a delayed Nintendo Switch 2 release schedule appeared online earlier this week. Brazilian games journalist Pedro Henrique Lute-Lippe made claims during an Aux do Control videocast based on insider information. Additionally, he broke the bad news on social media. Nobody wants to hear this, but this one is pretty intense. After consulting 5 sources from 3 different continents, all echoing basically the same thing, we can reveal that the launch of the Switch's successor should only happen in 2025. Several global news outlets have performed their own investigations, following up on Aux do Control's declaration. Eurogamer reached out to its network of trusty insiders. Their Friday evening update stated that we can now corroborate the earlier reports' whispers that the Switch 2, once destined for release later in 2024, is now set for Q1 2025. The console's launch moving into early next year, but still within the upcoming financial year. This didn't actually pan out, but not too far off. Is designed to ensure Switch 2's launch lineup features as many titles as possible. And so I'll cut it off there. There's just basically more corroboration of the story from other outlets, like VGC and Bloomberg. Bloomberg did indicate spring, perhaps going beyond Q1, so I think that's maybe worth noting. But ultimately, in hindsight, things do kind of match up interestingly here. And that has been the thinking by those who trust these sources, that the Switch 2, they were initially planning for a late 2024 release. But we had another update from Bloomberg about why Nintendo delayed these things, and yeah, it's tied to the games, supposedly. But here, in a new feature from Bloomberg, people familiar with the matter offered up some insight into the Switch 2 launch situation. While we don't get to hear just when Nintendo originally planned for the system to be available, we do get confirmation that it was pushed back. These inside sources claim that Nintendo ended up moving Switch 2 launch plans later due to a request from their own developers. Apparently, Nintendo's devs wanted more time in order to get Switch 2 games into tip-top shape. It's clear the devs wanted to ensure that first-party efforts were of the highest caliber for launch, and apparently Nintendo's higher-ups granted that request. So I find this extremely fascinating in hindsight. What games was Nintendo holding back for the launch of the Switch 2 to make sure it was successful? Well, they did have an excellent 1-2 punch in Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. I do think having Mario Kart World in June and Donkey Kong Bonanza in July, that's pretty much one of the best 1-2 punches you can get in back-to-back months to launch a console. Like, it's certainly excellent. But then I think about other games that were also in the conversations for maybe coming out early on for Switch 2, such as Metroid Prime 4, which has not gone on to sell that well, unfortunately, at least from what we've seen so far. That game didn't come out until December, and we heard about how Retro was actually having issues with making sure the game would be out in the year. They got it done, barely, but they got it done. However, this game, Metroid Prime 4, had been in development for many, many years, and we had extremely high expectations. Metroid Prime 4 didn't really meet those expectations. Yet there's conversations about a Metroid Prime 5. Will that happen? We'll see. But it's just kind of interesting to think about that we waited a very long time to get to the Switch 2, and yet something like Metroid Prime 4 still needed more time to be ready. But coming back to Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, this is where things start to get really interesting. So with Donkey Kong Bonanza, we know they were working on this game for many years, since the beginning of the Switch 1 generation essentially. Like here in the Ask Developer series on Donkey Kong Bonanza, here Tanaka says, "No, shortly after Super Mario Odyssey was released, we started running technical experiments with the idea of what kind of game do you get if everything in the environment is destructible." So that's not specifically Donkey Kong Bonanza, but they were already working on the tech that they would use for Donkey Kong Bonanza immediately after Mario Odyssey. They were already working on the next game is my point here, but continuing. Here Motokura says, "We originally began developing Donkey Kong Bonanza on Nintendo Switch, but we ran into some challenges. I think it was around 2021 when we started to think about moving development to Switch 2. So they started thinking about transitioning development to Switch 2 in 2021. They were working on the game before that point. So this game's been in the works for many years. But then let's go back to this rumor from 2021 when this transition happened, as officially confirmed by Nintendo. When this happened, we had this update from DK Vine. Development of the new Donkey Kong game purportedly began around 2017 or 2018, when Nintendo decided to bring Donkey Kong back internally for the first time since Nintendo EAD's Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, although Jungle Beat was more of a stopgap than a permanent status quo. I've been led to believe that this is a new EPD team that is formed from other teams specifically for the purpose of creating Donkey Kong games." So this rumor has panned out in hindsight. But also, on the note of Mario Kart World, they began prototyping for Mario Kart World March of 2017 when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had come out. Actually, before Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had come out, because that had come out the month after, April 2017. And they started developing in earnest on the project at the end of the year of 2017. These games, Mario Kart World, started development in 2017. Donkey Kong Bonanza seemingly started development in 2017 or 2018, around when Odyssey came out. They did not release until summer 2025. That is a ridiculous amount of time to work on these games. A ridiculous amount of time. These games are not 8-year games. They are great games. They are wonderful games. But they are not 8-year games. They are 4-year games. Sure, that's a reasonable amount of time for big games like these. Maybe throw in another year. Maybe they're 5-year development cycles. But 8 plus? And yet Nintendo took extra time to make sure they had a proper lineup ready to get the Switch 2 out after the Switch 1 had been out for over 8 years? And so you might be wondering what I'm getting at here. What I'm getting at here is that there's no way that the team that made Mario Kart was only making Mario Kart World throughout the entire Switch era. And there's no way that the Mario Odyssey team was only making Donkey Kong Bonanza all throughout the Switch era. And actually, considering that the rumor was accurate, it actually says that they took members of the Odyssey team to make Donkey Kong. The idea has been that they formed a new team to make Donkey Kong moving forward, which is what I've been talking about here on the channel for a while. Why is that relevant? Because it's Nintendo expanding and finding more ways to deliver other games, but it also implies that, yeah, 3D Mario, not that far off. Which brings me to all the latest reports and things that have been happening. We have the report from Nate the Hate and Video Games Chronicle about Star Fox and then Splatoon Raiders and Fire Emblem and Something Switch Sports and other Switch 2 editions in the summer, and then Dustbloods later on in the year and Ocarina of Time Remake as well. Those reports have been proving more and more true. These sources already have a great history of correctness, not to say that everything is correct, but a great history showing they have a reliability, showing that they have legitimate inside information, and these reports are proving true. Star Fox was confirmed. Splatoon Raiders is coming out in July. These things are happening essentially as we were told. No, Star Fox wasn't revealed exactly in April. It was revealed 6 days later. That's just clearly a small marketing shift. The game's still coming out in June. The way the game was described is exactly as described. These leaks are accurate, and so it's interesting because it kind of indicates that the rest of the leaks will also be true. Fire Emblem should also be coming out this summer. Dustbloods will likely be a holiday release. These things make sense. We did get the rating for Fire Emblem, and obviously, If Dustbloods hasn't come out yet, then it's probably a later year title, especially if they haven't even put out Elden Ring yet. So that all checks out, but we've been researching and theorizing about the Ocarina of Time remake. It does make sense to come up for the 40th anniversary, so that's very exciting to think about as something else Nintendo's been holding back on to show us. But these reports also indicated that 3D Mario would be coming out in 2027, which means not that far off, which also would indicate that what I'm talking about here about how there being a separate team formed from the Mario team to make Donkey Kong games moving forward, that means they've been working on Mario all this time, which makes sense because there's no way Donkey Kong Bonanza was the only game they were working on the last 8 to 9 years. That doesn't make any sense. Of course, Nintendo's always working on the next 3D Mario, and they want that readily available early on into a generation. Maybe it's not going to be out by this second holiday of Switch 2, but if the reports are true, and a big part of these reports have already proven to be true, it just makes sense. So 3D Mario is also something else Nintendo is holding back on that they could tease in a Nintendo Direct soon. The next Donkey Kong, no. Donkey Kong Bonanza is a Donkey Kong game for a long time, but it does bode well for the future of Donkey Kong. And going back to the team behind Mario Kart, which is also the team behind ARMS, what's next? Because I don't think what they've been working on should be that far off, because again, I don't think they took them 8 years to make Mario Kart World alone. There has to have been something else. So what is that project? That's something else Nintendo has been holding back on. Something else to consider though. Nintendo exceeded expectations, even their own expectations, even their own expanded forecast expectations, because initially they anticipated 15 million in sales, then they updated to 19 million, and they ended up selling 19.86 for their first fiscal year of Switch 2, which was not even an entire fiscal year. Switch 2 came out June 5th, the fiscal year starts on April 1st, ends March 31st, and so yeah, in a less than a 10-month span, they almost hit 20 million Switch 2 sold. However, Nintendo now also has to increase the price of Switch 2 by $50 USD, which they are the last of the main video game competitors to do it, and so they're now forecasting a dip for that next fiscal year to 16.5 million, which would still be within 500,000 of the actual sales of Switch 1 in its second fiscal year. So if Nintendo actually finds a way to slightly overdo their forecast like they just did with this first one, then the Switch 2 would still be pacing ahead of the Switch 1. I mean, even if they only hit this forecast or fall a little bit below, the Switch 2 will still be ahead of the Switch 1, but, you know, it'll be clearly falling behind pace. But Nintendo could still maintain or stay a bit ahead of pace here with the second fiscal year, depending on how well they hit their forecast. But the reason this is relevant for the discussion is because we've heard things said about how Nintendo is going to handle this upcoming fiscal year and beyond. And this also ties into the price increase. Like we talked about this a few days ago, President of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa, said Nintendo will prepare a robust software lineup to enhance the Switch 2 ownership value. We will work diligently to overcome this barrier. So Nintendo is promising a compelling catalog of games that they are working to do this to make sure people continue to buy Switch 2s despite these higher prices because of this economic climate. And something else from the Investors Q&A, also said by Furukawa, ideally, we would like to deliver new titles more frequently and in a more timely manner. But as he pointed out, software development periods have become longer than before. Even so, we will continue to work on various initiatives to ensure that many titles can be played on Nintendo Switch 2 by devising improvements to our development system and development process. I go back to the Donkey Kong Bonanza thing. There's now a Donkey Kong developer, seemingly, while they also have a team to make Mario. Where in the future, we are preparing a variety of new titles for Nintendo Switch 2, regardless of whether they are so-called major titles or not. In addition, we have new titles prepared for the second half of this fiscal year, in addition to those already announced, and we will provide details at the appropriate time. What is that appropriate time? I so hope it's June, where they actually give us a big direct, because clearly Nintendo's holding back on things here. I also find this part interesting, and I didn't really focus on this point a few days ago when I brought this up. They are so-called major titles, or not. Like, it's interesting, this part, and I wonder if this kind of ties into, like, for example, Splatoon Raiders and Star Fox, which are actually being priced cheaper than your typical full retail game. Maybe because of the pricing, they're not your typical major title, but for me, Splatoon Raiders and Star Fox, from the Nintendo side of things at least, will be the most exciting games that have come out this year so far. And what's neat is that they're actually going to be cheaper than everything else that Nintendo has put out this year so far. And to be clear, I'm referring specifically to Nintendo-published titles, like games like Resident Evil Requiem, for example. That's been my favorite game this year so far, which I enjoyed on my Switch too, by the way. Like, there are great third-party games coming, and that's also something else to consider. Third-party support has just been really strong on Switch 2, and it seems like that's just going to be a thing now. So that's another constant element to consider with these presentations. There's been a lot of talk, there's even been data mines and leaks of Monster Hunter Wilds for Switch 2. That's gotta get announced at some point, right? There have been talks of GTA coming to Switch 2. I don't know if that's gonna happen for this year. There's some debate there. I'm skeptical of that, but if that's happening, that would also be a really big announcement to make. But main point is here, Nintendo is telling us themselves they have things they want to announce for this year. They're telling us that they are going to give us a lineup that justifies the price. We look at what Nintendo's put out so far, and clearly there needs to have been more that they've been working on. And that's just considering the EPD projects. I haven't mentioned things like Monolith Soft. What's the next Monolith Soft title? What about next level games? We've been talking about Luigi's Mansion 4. There are different Nintendo developers that have yet to show us what they are doing. We just got the recent Star Fox announcement. Looks incredible. There's a lot of conversation about the art design, the art style. I did a little bit of a graphics analysis yesterday, and there's a lot of debate there. But you want to know why there's a debate there? It's because finally, after decades, Nintendo has powerful hardware, and they finally put out a game that's realistic. And so a lot of people are taken back by this realism. They're not used to it from Nintendo. But I think this is a little bit of a glimpse into what Nintendo is holding back on. We haven't really seen Nintendo take advantage of the Switch 2 hardware. I actually think Star Fox is still barely scratching the surface here, even with the beautiful visuals, because it's still a relatively small-scale project. It's an on-rails game. It's a remake of an N64 title. We're still not even sure if even that has DLSS. We've seen third-party games utilize DLSS, but not Nintendo. Is it possible that most of these games have not been using DLSS because these titles start off as Switch 1 titles? We've yet to see those ground-up Switch 2 titles yet. Maybe Star Fox is one of them, but we're still just scratching the surface here. And that's what's exciting about this next Nintendo Direct when it does happen, presumably June. Fingers crossed that that's Nintendo's plan. We'll see. But they have a lot to show off here. They have a lot that they can put out to really sell us. I'm not saying everything's going to be shown off in one presentation. I think there's a really good chance we're going to get another big Nintendo Direct, another hour-long Nintendo Direct. The only two general Nintendo Directs for having to do with Switch 2 last year were hour-long presentations, the longest Directs we've ever gotten. And they had a lot of games, but even then, there should be more. I hope we get another one. I've been calling them the Super Direct. And like all Directs, super or not, surely there's going to be different opinions on how good the presentation is. If you don't like Zelda, if you don't like whatever else they show there, then maybe you're going to be disappointed. Like if you only want to see 3D Mario, and Nintendo does not show off 3D Mario, a title that supposedly is not coming out until next year, you may be disappointed, but maybe you shouldn't be expecting 3D Mario in this next Direct if you believe the leaks. Maybe you don't. In which case, you know, certainly 3D Mario does make sense to happen. Like, I'm sure they're working on it. I'm sure it's not that far off, as we've been talking about for a while. But what do you think? What do you make of this overall situation and how Nintendo hasn't really shown us too much ground-up Switch 2 stuff yet? How they took a long time to even give us Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, and clearly they had to have been able to get even more done over all these years. So let me know in the comments below. But if you've gone this far and you found yourself enjoying this video and you haven't subscribed already, I would appreciate your subscription. This is AndresRestart. I'll see y'all really soon. Take care.